Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Was flying back early this morning from Las Vegas, got online, started going through the exosphere, saw about what had happened with yet another terrible incident taking place in Minnesota. Now, of course, everyone immediately rushed to judgment and came to their own definitive conclusion, right? This is cold-blooded murder, or this is completely lawfully justified. We're not going to be able to get there, and candidly, it'd be a little irresponsible to try to do it. But I do think there's another legal angle, one that nobody really seems to be talking about, but one that, candidly, I think we need to have a serious discussion because, well, it's the precipice for all of this. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the real legal issue with ICE shootings that no one is talking about. Okay, America, we are talking about this incident right here as we play this over the top. We're playing it over the top because we're not going to sit down and do a frame-by-frame breakdown like some have, and I always appreciate how people want to slow a video way down and say, aha, it definitively proves something, when in fact they will be judged on what they perceived, in real time, all right? Now, I admit that there are certainly some issues here, especially when you take a look at this video here, that potentially or possibly shows the now deceased being disarmed before the fatal shots are fired. However, there could be other explanations. Many people had commented that the officers were already yelling that he had a firearm. The one officer who disarmed him may have not been able to announce in that chaos that he had been disarmed. Other officers see him reaching for the area where they believe the firearm to be, and we end up in this terrible situation. And there will be an opportunity to go over what the law says when we know exactly what happened. Now, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. There are some that have suggested that, hey, merely possessing a firearm while contacting law enforcement is a great way to get yourself killed. I strongly disagree with that statement. There are very few, if any, incidents of people just being shot and killed for merely lawfully possessing a firearm. No, oftentimes it is actually the behavior they're engaged in simultaneously to possessing the firearm that often turns out to be the problem, and that's what I kind of want to focus on today. And the reason I want to focus on it today is that the Patty Murrays and all the other liberals out there in the world immediately wanted to say this was cold-blooded murder and proof that we're living in a totalitarian state. But the question I want to ask all of you is, are we really moving towards a totalitarian state, or are we already living in an anarchist state? Because every one of these tragic yet preventable incidents are all precipitated by what? That's right, illegal activity of those that ultimately turned out to be the victims. And when I say victims, America, what I mean is they are in fact victims of their own poor choices. You see, every single person who's been injured or worse yet killed in a manner such as this was engaged in what activity when that occurred? That's right, they were intentionally obstructing, thwarting, and hindering otherwise legal ICE operations. In every single one of these incidents, even this one here that we're talking about today, there was a litany of people, a couple of which turned out to become the victims here, that were engaged in the activity of intentionally trying to thwart, obstruct, delay, or otherwise hinder any type of deportation and immigration efforts. Is that a crime? It most definitely is. In some instances, does it constitute a felony? Yes, it does. In some instances, would it be considered a felony which is being committed upon the person of another individual, this being an ICE officer? So the answer to that question is yes, it would. Oh, and then, by the way, when you're taking a look at the 4 reasons upon which we can use lethal force, you will see that if you are having a felony committed upon your person, in almost all jurisdictions, that will justify the use of lethal force. But again, we're going to have to see a lot more facts before we can truly make an educated assessment there. But is this dangerous behavior? Yeah, it certainly is. Is it irresponsible behavior, reckless behavior? It most definitely is. But I also said it was illegal behavior. How you say? Well, let's start here. Anyone who hinders, obstructs, delays immigration efforts, or even attempts to or conspires to do so is guilty of a criminal offense under 8 United States Code Section 1324. And we have actually talked about that statute on several occasions. But guess what? If these actions to hinder, obstruct, or delay ultimately result in you coming into contact, physical contact with a law enforcement officer that could then be deemed an assault, Now we're talking about a violation of 18 United States Code Section 111, which states that it is unlawful for any person to forcibly assault, resist, oppose, impede, intimidate, or interfere with any person designated in Section 114 of this title while they are engaged in or on account of the performance of official duties. And then when you take a look at Section 1114, it lists all of these other statutes which cite to particular administrative agencies, and yes, Immigration Customs Enforcement is one of them. Now, how much trouble can you be in? Well, according to the very same statute, where the acts in violation of this section constitute only simple assault, be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. And where such acts involve physical contact with the victim of that assault or the intent to commit another felony, be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 8 years or both. And listen, if you don't believe that to intentionally hinder, thwart, delay, obstruct immigration efforts is a crime, ask now former Judge Hannah Dugan. Now, I also figured, hey, might as well take a look at Minnesota law, right? And I found a statute that almost gets us there, and that's Minnesota Statute 609.50, obstructing legal process, arrest, or firefighting. And it states, it is unlawful for anyone to obstruct, hinder, or prevent the lawful execution of any legal process, civil or criminal, or apprehension of another on a charge or conviction of a criminal offense. And you're sitting there going, well, that completely covers it. Yes, however, when you take a look at how Minnesota state law defines peace officer, it does not include any federal law enforcement agencies other than recognized tribal police inside the state of Minnesota. But even if it did cover it, we'd of course have to ask ourselves, would they really prosecute any of this activity under Minnesota law? And that is actually the great segue for what I want to really talk about here, because let us remember that all of this activity, as dangerous, as irresponsible as it is being advocated for and promoted by who? That's right, local politicians right there in that community and elsewhere. You literally have not only local politicians, but politicians on the national level advocating for unlawful, dangerous, and oftentimes felonious behavior. And anyone who has advocated to stop these deportation efforts by whatever means necessary ultimately has some blood on their hands as well. And you can take a look at other types of law enforcement instances that were controversial at times. For example, in the 80s and 90s when the DEA and LAPD were kicking in the doors of crack houses all the time. You could take a look at how federal authorities went and rounded up some of the January 6th defendants. But at no time in either of those two moments was there literally an organized effort of people who oftentimes have driven in from the suburbs, from their cushy little bedroom communities into other communities to go out then and intentionally thwart, obstruct, and oftentimes place federal law enforcement officers in danger. This is not an advocacy for the immigration policies because we don't need to get into that here. What this is an advocacy for sanity. Is there an opportunity for people who are opposed to this to fight these immigration and deportation efforts? There absolutely is. But those battles occur either in the courtroom or in the halls of Congress, not on our streets. So, America, the question I have for you, are we really heading towards a totalitarian state, or are we already living in an anarchist state? Okay, listen, we're going to go ahead and link up some of the videos in case you guys haven't seen them and we're living under a rock for the last 24 hours or something like that. They'll be linked up down below. And yes, as we learn more information about what actually truly transpired here, we will probably get a video done where we can take a look at what happened and apply the law to that. Now listen, if you got any questions about this or the stuff we normally talk about here at Washington Gun Law, you should know how to get a hold of us by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, cool. Click on that link right there. Tell us all about it. If you want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter and hear about all the cool stuff that they don't let us talk about here, there's a link in the description box for you to do that. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.